It's pretty amazing when you think about it. 2,500 years ago, in the same little corner of ancient India, two princes would walk away from their thrones, and in doing that, they would change the world forever. Today, we're going to explore the parallel lives and the very different paths of Buddhism and Jainism. And here's the thing, they didn't just pop up out of nowhere. They were a direct answer to a world that was in a kind of crisis. And if we can understand that crisis, well, that's the key to understanding them both.
So this is the central puzzle we're really going to unpack. I mean, what are the odds? It's no coincidence that these two huge traditions emerged side by side. Their birth was a direct response to a very specific moment in history, a time of just massive social, spiritual, and economic change. To really get a handle on the solutions they were offering, we first have to understand the problem they were trying to solve.
All right, so let's travel back in time. We're going to the 6th century BC. The old ways, the rigid, priest-led Vedic traditions, were starting to feel, well, a little stale. Society was buzzing. A brand new agricultural economy was creating wealth. Cities were growing for the first time in ages, and more people were looking at the old system and asking, is this really it? Is this the only way? This wasn't just some quiet grumbling. It was a deep, society-wide search for new answers to the biggest questions in life.
Okay, so let's break down the pressures that were building up. First, you just had this growing skepticism. People were starting to doubt all the complex, super expensive rituals and the unquestioned authority of the Brahmin priests. Second, there was a power struggle brewing. The Kshatriyas, that's the warrior and ruling class, were getting tired of being second fiddle to the Brahmins in the spiritual world. Third, and this is a huge economic point, the new farming economy absolutely depended on cattle for plowing fields, but the traditional Vedic religion involved massive animal sacrifices. So you see the problem, right? The old religion was literally threatening people's ability to make a living. And finally, you have this new rising merchant class, the Vaisyas. The old rules were just holding them back. For their businesses to thrive, they needed peace and stability, and they needed a system that allowed lending money at interest, both things the old order wasn't keen on. The stage was perfectly set for something totally new to emerge. And right into this world of chaos and change, two incredible figures appear. And what's so interesting is that they didn't come from the priests or the merchants. They came from that very same Kshatriya warrior class. We have Siddhartha Gautama, who would become the Buddha, and Vardhamana, who would become known as Mahavira. Both were princes. Both were born into lives of unbelievable wealth and comfort, which just makes their decision to leave it all behind even more extraordinary.
Let's start with Siddhartha. So, picture this. He's born a prince, and his father deliberately shields him from every single hardship in the world. He has no idea about old age, sickness, or death. But then, at age 29, everything changes. He takes a chariot ride outside the palace walls and sees, for the very first time, an old man, a sick man, a dead body, and a wandering holy man. And bam! His perfect world is completely shattered. He can't unsee what he's seen. He renounces everything, his title, his family, his wealth, in what's known as the Great Departure. For 6 long years, he searches for an answer, trying everything from philosophy to extreme self-starvation. Finally, he sits down under a Bodhi tree, vowing not to get up until he finds the truth. And it's there that he attains Nirvana, or enlightenment, and becomes the Buddha, the awakened one.
Now, at almost the exact same time, Mahavira is on a strikingly similar path. He's also a Kshatriya prince. He leaves his comfortable home at age 30, but his was a path of almost unimaginable hardship. For 12 years, he wandered, giving up everything, even his clothes, subjecting his body to the most severe forms of penance. And then at the age of 42, he achieves what the Jains call Kaivalya. Now, this isn't just enlightenment, it's omniscience. It's a state of complete, total, absolute knowledge, where you're free from all karma. He had become the Jina, which means the great conqueror. Not a conqueror of land or armies, but a conqueror of the self.
I mean, just look at this when you put their stories side by side. The parallels are just staggering. Both from the Kshatriya class, both from noble families. They leave home at practically the same age to start these long, painful spiritual quests. And they both come out the other side with a new title that signifies what they've achieved. Siddhartha becomes the Buddha, the enlightened one, and Vardhamana becomes the Jina, the conqueror. It is a truly remarkable echo in history.
Okay, so they both went on these incredible journeys. They both identified the fundamental problem of being human as suffering. But what answers did they bring back? What were their prescriptions? This is where their paths really start to diverge. They offered two different, totally revolutionary treatments for this universal condition we all face. The Buddha's approach is so methodical, you could almost think of it like a doctor's diagnosis. It's all laid out in the 4 noble truths. So, first, the symptom. Life is suffering.
The Pali word is dukkha. It's just a basic fact of existence. Second, what's the cause of the symptom? It comes from our craving, our clinging, our desire for things to be different than they are. Third, the prognosis? Is there a cure? Yes. The good news is it is possible to stop suffering by reaching nirvana. And fourth, the prescription. Here is the exact path you need to follow to get there.
And this is that prescription, the Noble Eightfold Path. You'll often see it symbolized by the Dharma wheel. It's a set of 8 interconnected practices that cover everything: ethical behavior, mental discipline, and true wisdom. But the most important concept here is that the Buddha called this the middle path. Remember, he had tried the extreme luxury of his palace and the extreme self-torture of an ascetic, and he found that neither worked. The solution, he said, wasn't in either extreme. It was in balance, in moderation.
And right here, this is the fundamental fork in the road between these two philosophies. While Buddhism is all about that balanced middle path, Jainism proposes something much more rigorous. It's a path of intense self-discipline, and it's built around what are called the 5 great vows. These are absolute commitments to ahimsa, nonviolence, satya, truth, asteya, non-stealing, aparigraha, non-possession, and brahmacharya, celibacy.
Let's just pause and really focus on that first vow, ahimsa, because the way Jainism interprets nonviolence is totally unique and just profound. For Jains, nonviolence is the supreme principle, and it applies to everything. It's not just about not hurting people or animals. They believe that everything in the universe has a soul, or jiva. We're talking plants, rocks, a stream of running water, even dust particles. This profound belief leads to practices like monks gently sweeping the path in front of them so they don't accidentally step on an insect, or wearing masks over their mouths to avoid inhaling and killing microorganisms. It is an absolute, all-encompassing commitment to causing no harm whatsoever.
Now, as it goes with any really powerful set of ideas, the original teachings of both the Buddha and Mahavira didn't stay static. Of course not. Over the centuries, their followers debated, they discussed, and they interpreted the messages in different ways. This led to councils, arguments, and eventually to major splits, schisms, that created the different schools of thought that we know today.
In Buddhism, the biggest split created 2 major branches. On one side, you have Hinayana, which is the more traditional, orthodox school. They see the Buddha as an incredible human teacher, but a human nonetheless. For them, the goal is to become an arhat. That's an individual who works hard and achieves their own personal nirvana. But then you have Mahayana, which calls itself the greater vehicle. Why? Because their goal isn't just about saving yourself, it's about saving all living beings. And to do that, they took the huge step of deifying the Buddha, seeing him as a divine being. Their ideal isn't the arhat, but the bodhisattva, a being who actually achieves enlightenment, but then, out of incredible compassion, chooses to delay their own final nirvana to stay behind and help everyone else. And, once you start to see the Buddha as a god, it's a very short step to creating idols and statues to worship him.
And that shift, especially in Mahayana Buddhism, led to this just incredible explosion of art. With the need to represent a divine Buddha came this rich, complex visual language. A big part of that is the hand gestures, which are called mudras. Each one tells a story. For instance, the one you see here, the Bhumi Sparsha Mudra, which means touching the earth, depicts the exact moment of the Buddha's enlightenment. He's calling the earth itself to bear witness to his victory over temptation. It's an entire narrative packed into a single, elegant gesture.
Jainism also had its own major split, which resulted in 2 main sects. First, you have the Swetambara, which means white-clad. Their monks wear simple white robes. They also believe that women are fully capable of achieving salvation, and they hold that Mahavira himself was married. Then you have the Digambara, which means sky-clad. They take that vow of non-possession to its absolute limit. Their most devout monks renounce everything, and that includes clothing. They also believe that a woman's body is an inherent impediment to liberation, so she must be reborn as a man to achieve it. So as you can see, these are not just minor disagreements over dress code. They're deep, fundamental differences in philosophy.
So yes, there were differences, and yes, there were internal splits, but when you step back and look at the big picture, the paths laid out by these 2 princes from ancient India have had a truly profound and lasting impact on world history, on philosophy, on art, influencing billions of people across Asia and far, far beyond. In his final moments, the Buddha didn't name a successor. He didn't appoint a new leader. Instead, he left his followers with this incredibly powerful message. It is a radical call for self-reliance. It just perfectly captures one of the core ideas of his entire teaching.
Liberation isn't a gift from a god or a priest. It's something each and every person has to achieve for themselves, through their own effort, their own awareness.
In the end, this whole incredible story really comes down to that one number, 2. From the personal quests of two men came two major world religions that would reshape continents. Buddhist ideas would travel along the Silk Road, touching everything from Greek philosophy to the modern mindfulness app you might have on your phone. Jainism's absolute commitment to nonviolence would go on to inspire modern leaders like Mahatma Gandhi in his fight for India's independence. These two paths have offered peace, meaning, and a guide to living for billions of people for over 2.5 millennia. The scale of that legacy is just staggering.
And so that brings us to the final question, one for all of us. In our modern world, with its constant notifications, its endless distractions, its relentless pressure, what can we learn from the Buddhist call for a middle path, for balance, or from Mahavira's example of profound self-discipline and self-conquest? How can these ancient ideas about mindfulness, compassion, and nonviolence help us navigate the challenges we face today? Maybe, just maybe, some of the solutions we're looking for have been waiting for us for the last 2,500 years. Thanks for tuning in.